Okay, can you see my whole screen?
Yep, you're good.
Okay.
Oh wait, like we just see the Google window or whatever. Like just the slides, if that's what you
Yeah.
Okay.
Do you want to go over just the slides from
Yep.
last time? Okay.
Okay, so last time, I think that was Sunday, we went over arrays and array lists and the difference between them. So we're just going to run really quickly back over that, just to make sure you guys remember because they're pretty important. So arrays and array lists are basically like are like lists of a lot of different elements so that you can handle them more easily rather than just like having random elements scattered all over. So an array is an object that holds a fixed number of elements. So when you define an array, you set how many elements can be in this array and you can't change it. And all of the elements in your array also have to be the same type. So like they have to be all integers or all strings or all doubles. And it's basically just like a collection of data, as you remember, and down here is how you form your array if you want a refresher. So you guys also should remember the concept of indexes from last week. So indexes are how your array like keeps track of the elements in it. This also goes for array lists. So each element of your array has a different index number, and the computer will start counting the index from 0 instead of 1 like we usually do. So we start counting from 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 in the index of an array or an array list. And so you can call an element of an array or an array list using its index. Okay, and also we taught you how to print an individual element of an array. And that's pretty basic, like we taught you before. You use the print line method and you just write the name of the array and then in brackets the index of the element you want to print. Okay, and then we have array lists. Array lists are kind of similar to arrays, but there is one big major difference. An array list, you can change the size of your array list all throughout your code. So you don't have to set a certain size that your array list is at the very beginning when you create it. The number of elements in your array list can like get bigger or smaller depending on like how many elements you put in, and it can change throughout your code. And as a refresher, this is how you make your array list. And yep, that is pretty simple. Oh, also for array list, you have to import the ability to make an array list at the very top of your code. And then we also taught you how to add and delete elements from an array list. Those are also pretty similar techniques. So to add to an array list, you just use the name of the array list plus .add, and in the parentheses you put the element you want to add, and it'll just stick that onto the end of your array list. And then when you want to delete an element from your array list, you use the name of the array list plus .remove, and in the parentheses you just write the index of the element you want to remove. Remember, you can't like just write the element in the parentheses for remove. You can't call an element by saying like what the element actually is, because what if it's an array list of strings and you have 2 entries in your array list that say like dog, and then you say I want to remove dog, but your computer won't know which element to actually remove because you have 2 of them. So you're going to have all of them using their indexes, and that's why indexes are really important. Okay, and also last time we taught you how to print a specific element of an array list. It's kind of similar to printing an element of an array. It's just instead you type the name of your array list dot get to like access the element you want to print, and then parentheses index. Okay, so that's it for what we did last week. If anyone has any questions about that, you can just go ahead and unmute yourself and ask them or type them in the chat. It's really important that you guys get this and like are able to understand it. So does anyone have any questions, or are you confused on anything at all? Or I can go over something more slowly. Okay, so I'll take that to mean we're good so far. Again, if you have any questions like throughout the lesson, please feel free to like ask us, type in the chat or something. Okay, so one very important thing that we need to know how to do with arrays and array lists is find the length of them. So maybe sometimes you just don't remember how long you made your array or array list, or it's, in the case of array list, it's always changing. So you want a simple method to just give you the length or the size of your array list. So these are different for the two types. So to find the length of your array, which is basically like how many elements, how many entries are in your array, you type the name of your array and then dot length. And that should provide you with an int, that a whole number that's the number of elements in your array, so like 6. And just to remind you, so like if your array has 6 elements in it, that means that the last index is going to be 5 because we start counting from 0 and not 1. And then if we want to do the same thing for an array list to find the length of it or how many elements is in your array list, instead of the dot length for array, you're going to do the name of your array list, then dot size parentheses. And it can be confusing, or people always get these mixed up, but it's really important to remember that there are different ways to do stuff with arrays and array lists.
Before we move on, let's just like try this really quick, just this. Okay, so if you guys want to open up BlueJ, I'm just gonna go ahead and make a new class. I'm just gonna call it loops because that's the main focus of today. So opening that up, and then, okay. Like always, just go ahead and delete everything, and then loops. Okay. So like Alex said before, whenever we're working with ArrayList, we have to import it. So we're going to go ahead and import java.util.ArrayList. Okay, so now that we imported that, now we can use it. So just to show you how the dot length and dot size works, let's just go ahead and create a really simple array just so we can kind of see how it works. We could use that in the next step, which is the loops. So let's go ahead and make in let's just make an array, and then we'll make an array list, and then we'll go from there. Okay, so to make an array again, so you do the data type, let's just do int. I'm just going to call it array equals new int, and let's just make it like 3 or something. Okay, so now let's just fill it. I'll just do random numbers, it doesn't really matter. Okay, so now we created our array and we filled our array. So now let's just go ahead and array dot length. And you might be wondering, like, okay, well, we know the length is 3 because that's what we declared up there. But sometimes, let's say you're coding and you have an array and you're working with your array, but you can't remember what the size is, and you can't go back and like count it, but you can't find it. It's just when your code gets a lot longer and maybe more complicated, it's a really easy way to just find it without having to search back through and find where you made your array. So I'm going to compile, and looks good. So and it printed out 3, which is what we expected because we made it a length of 3, and then we have 3 elements in it from indexes 0 to 2. Okay, so now I'm gonna comment this out. To block comment, I don't know if you guys went over this. Just highlight everything, and at the top of your keyboard, you see where it says F8. That'll comment all of that out. So it won't be run when we compile and run our code. Okay, so now we know that that one works. Let's try it with an array list. I'm just going to do array list. Again, I'm just going to do of ints. I'm just going to call it array list. Okay, so now we have our array list created, and again, you could put like double string other stuff in there. Okay, so now do like and finding the length or size of an array list is really, really helpful because like I said, for regular arrays, you could always just go back and find it, but array lists, you might have things added randomly throughout your code, and then, or you might have it not, you might not have a set number in your code of how much you added, if that makes sense. So finding the length of the array list using the dot size method is really, really, really helpful, especially for array lists, because you don't have that set size. And let's just go ahead and add one more. Okay. And then we're going to do array list dot size. So again, for arrays, we're going to do dot length without a parentheses at the end. And for array list, we're going to do dot size with parentheses at the end. I know it could be a little hard to remember and stuff because it's not the same, but if you do it over and over, you'll remember it. And yeah. Okay, so let's go ahead and compile this one. Oops. Okay, and we have 4, which again is what we expected because here we added 1, 2, 3, and 4 elements to our array. Okay, do you guys have any questions about this? Okay, cool. Let's go back to the slide. Okay, here.
And yeah,
Okay.
so we finished going over how to find the length of your array list, and now we're going to move on to loops. So these are really important things you need to know and like how to structure your code. So they're really important for you to understand how they work. So the first type of loop that we're going to talk about today is a for loop. So this is like a way to structure your code so that part of your program gets run through multiple times. And you can only use this when you know exactly how many times you want to repeat that part of your code. So I'm just going to get into how you format your for loop because that'll make it easier to understand how it works. So first you type the word for, and then inside your parentheses, first you're going to make an integer variable. You can name it whatever you want. You can name it like x or count or number, whatever you want, and you're going to set it to, well, whatever value you want, but usually we just start at 0 to make it easier to keep track of. But this integer value that you make here, like you can make it equal to 1 or 2 or 3 or 4. So that's just what your for loop is going to take advantage of this integer variable and use it to keep track of how many times the for loop repeats itself. So after you make your integer variable, you're going to add a semicolon, and then after that, you basically create a limit so like the for loop is going to keep running as long as this limit or this condition is true. So in this example, as long as x is less than 5, then this for loop is going to keep repeating itself. And then after that, you add another semicolon to separate it, and then you just tell the computer how many, like what you want to be done to your int variable every time the for loop runs. This is kind of confusing, but for example, so if you say every time the for loop runs, you want to add 1 to x. So you type x plus plus, and then so that's the basic structure of how you set up a for loop. And then you want curly brackets, and inside the curly brackets, you write whatever code you want to be repeated over and over again. So here we have a print statement, and it's going to print hello. So it's going to print hello as many times as the for loop runs through itself. And so basically how a for loop works is it's going to execute the code inside the curly brackets once, and then it's going to carry out this third operation. So after it prints hello once, it's going to add 1 to x, and then it's at the end of the for loop, and after it's added 1 to x, it's going to check if x is still less than 5. And if x is still less than 5, the for loop is going to repeat itself again. It's going to print hello again, so the second time. And then after this time, it's going to add 1 to x again, and it's going to check if x is still less than 5. So at this point, x is 2, so 2 is still less than 5, so it's going to keep running. So this is going to repeat itself over and over again. X is going to get 1 digit bigger every time you run through. all the way until the 5th time. Yeah. When x is going to be equal to 5 at the end of the for loop. And then the computer is going to check, is x less than 5? 5 is not less than 5. So the for loop is going to stop running, and you're going to continue on with the rest of your code after that. For loops can be difficult and complicated to understand, so let us know if you don't fully understand it, and we can try to explain it over again.
Okay, well, let's just go ahead and try to BlueJ. A lot of times, it's like with coding, even though you might not understand it when you first hear about it, when you do it on your own and actually run the code, a lot of times it makes a lot more sense, and then you'll gradually, understand it better, and then finally you'll get it. So let's go ahead and try this. I'm just going to go ahead and open up the same one as before, and so again, I am just going to comment this out in case we need it later. Okay, so let's just use the loop example that was in the PowerPoint. Okay, so for int, and again, you can name it whatever you want. I usually just do x because it's easiest, equals 0. X is less than, let's do x is less than 7. And x plus plus. Okay, so those are the 3 main parts of our for loop. So we have kind of like our starting value, our condition, and how much we increase x every time we go through the loop. Okay, so let's just do hi. Okay, so when we run this, it should print out 7 times because x goes from 0 to 6. Because as long as x is less than 7, it's going to print it. So we have 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 equaling 7 times. And when x becomes 7, 7 is no longer less than 7, so it's going to exit the loop. And then go on to the rest of the code, which we don't have anything else after this. So it's just going to not print anything else. So we have this. Let's compile it. And then I don't know. Okay, there we go. I don't know why I wasn't working before. Okay, so we have hi printed out 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7 times, just like we predicted. Okay, so now you can kind of see how that works. And again, you could put anything inside of here. It doesn't have to be printing something out. And as you'll see later, we're going to use these loops to print out all of our elements from an array. And you'll see that towards the end of today. Okay, now what if we were to do something like x is less than or equal to 7? Caitlin C, how many times will hi print out if x is less than or equal to 7? Caitlin C?
You said 8, and that is completely right.
Yes, perfect. 8 times, because when x becomes 7, we're going to check, okay, is 7 less than or equal to 7? Yes, it is, because it's equal, so we're going to print it one more time. And when it becomes 8, it's no longer going to meet the requirements, so then we're going to exit. Perfect. Okay.
Caitlin says the computer said it reached the end of file while parsing. I forgot what that means. So Caitlin, did it print out hi at all? Or is it just like a red error in your code? When you compiled it, it said error. Oh, okay.
Do you want to maybe share your screen? I think that might be the easiest way. Here, Keelan, would you feel comfortable with sharing your screen so we could, I feel like that's just the easiest way to help fix errors.
Okay.
Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and stop sharing my screen then. Okay, so if you want to share your screen and oh, okay. Super easy fix for this. I think all you need is just an end parentheses at the end. So whenever, do you see how you have the 4 and you have x equals 0, less than 7, x plus plus, parentheses, and then you have that open bracket. So whenever we have that open bracket, we're always going to need a closed bracket. So on the next line, why don't you just try putting a closed bracket? Yeah, and then now do you want to try running it?
You.
I think you also need closed brackets for the, I think you need 2 more closed brackets. Yeah.
Oh yeah,
There you go.
so
Perfect.
always remember when you make an open bracket, you always need to have a closed bracket to like pair it. So yeah.
Nice.
Super easy to forget.
Okay, do you want to try compiling just to be sure and let us know if there's still an error or something. I'm gonna go ahead and share my screen again. And does anyone have any questions about the for loops? It works? Cool, good job. Okay, let's go ahead and move on to our second type of loops. Sorry, my computer's a little bit slow. Okay.
Okay, so now that we talked about for loops, there's another type of loop we need to explain to you. So now we have while loops. This is fairly similar to the for loop because it also allows you to repeat part of your program over and over and over again. But it's kind of less complicated than a for loop because you can use it when you're not sure how many times exactly you want to go through your while loop. So before you make your while loop, while you're coding, you're not sure how many times you're going to go through because maybe it changes every time you run it depending on different conditions. So basically, your while loop is going to repeat itself over and over as long as the condition inside the parentheses here is true. So every time you finish your while loop once, the computer is going to go back to the beginning and check if, for example, x is still less than 5. And if that is true, it's going to keep repeating. So in a while loop, in the parentheses afterwards, there is only one section, only one condition. So you don't like have to make a variable specifically for your while loop to use. But typically you do basically have the same components of your for loop when you're making your while loop, just like in a different place. So for example, here, yes, you only have one condition in the parentheses after your while loop, but that condition like requires a variable to begin with. So you're going to need to make that variable somewhere earlier in your code. And then in this example, the main body of the code inside your while loop is actually two actions. It's going to print hello, so basically this has the same result as the other for loop. It's going to print hello 5 times. And then the second part is it adds 1 to x every time it goes through. So basically this x plus plus is what limits your while loop. It's what like tells it's what defines how many times you're going to go through the while loop, kind of. So like the good thing about having a while loop, basically there are two benefits. So one, you don't have to set exactly how many times you're going to run through it when you create it. So it can vary depending on your code and how you run it. And also the variable that defines how many times you go through doesn't have to be specifically made for that loop. It can have other purposes before or after or during the while loop. But it's also true that this inside the parentheses of your while loop, it doesn't have to be something like x is less than 5. It can also just be like a Boolean. So like if you have a Boolean value named running that's like either true or false, you can say, oh, while running is true, then we're going to go through this code over and over. So that,
yeah, you could also use it, for example, something like, let's say you make a game, like a game, and you ask the user, do you want to play again? And it could be like, while again equals yes, then it's going to keep on playing the game. But then as soon as they say no, then it's going to exit and then the game will end. So like Alex said, it doesn't have to be like a number kind of value in here. It could be like a Boolean. So that's a big difference, like the main difference between for loops and while loops. Also, so what do you guys think would happen? Let's say this right here. Let's say we didn't have it. So the code just ended after this right here. What do you guys think would happen? Like how many times do you think it would be printed, or what do you think would happen to the code? You can take your mics off, or if you want to type in the chat, just what do you guys think? Any ideas?
it would run forever.
Yes, Alex. Yeah, so it would run forever. So that's a really common mistake when working with loops. Because if we think about it, we're only going to somehow be greater than 5 because x is increasing. But let's say x never increased and x was always 0. Well, 0 is always going to be less than 5, so we're always going to be printing hello. So again, because we have x plus plus, we'll go from 0 to 1 to 2 to 3 to 4, finally to 5, where 5 isn't less than 5, so it'll exit. So again, like Alex said before, we have the 3 same parts as in the for loop. We have the initial, we have the condition, and we have the increment. It's just different placement. So all 3 are important and necessary. So if you didn't have this, it'll run forever, basically, infinite loop. Which again is a really easy fix. It's just something that comes up a lot. So if you ever see your screen and just like keeps on printing something, then you've probably forgotten that statement, but it's super, super easy to add. So just something to be aware of, so you can easily fix it. Okay, do you guys have any questions about that? Okay, then let's hop back over to BlueJ. Okay, so let's actually turn this right here, what we have right here, and let's turn it into a while loop, meaning that we're going to have it perform the exact same function. We're going to have high print out 8 times. We're just going to use a while loop instead of a for loop. Okay, so let's start off with our int. I'm just going to do y this time, equals 0. So again, this right here is going to correlate to this part right here. And now we're going to have while y is less than or equal to 7. And this right here is going to be correlated to this part right here. So that's our condition. And inside, we're going to have system.out.println hi. And then, as you can first see, that right there is going to be the same thing as right here. So that's our body of our loop. And of course, because we don't want this to run forever, we need our last part right here, which is our increment. So we're just going to do y plus plus. And there we go. This basically performs the exact same thing as this does. It's just going to be a different format. So I'm going to go ahead and comment this out. And let's go ahead and run it. Okay. And again, like last time, we have it printed out 8 times 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So now let's just see what would happen if we forgot this y plus plus. So like we talked about before, it's going to be an infinite loop, meaning that it's going to be continuously printing out high, because 0 is always going to be less than 7. So let's kind of see what that looks like or what it's going to do. So compile it and run it. And as you can see, it keeps on going, right? It's printing. It's not stopping. It just keeps on going. So that's how you know that you've forgotten that last part. So how to exit it, if you see at the bottom next to the blue bar, there should be an arrow. Just go ahead and click that, and that'll exit. That'll exit it. And then once you see that, then you can go back here. You'll say to yourself, okay, that's an infinite loop. I know I forgot my increment. So then you can just go ahead and add that back, and it should be all good. Do you guys have any questions about infinite loops or just anything to do with while loops or anything like that? Okay, cool. So we got about 10 minutes, so let's go ahead and cover the last part for today.
Yeah.
Computer is being slow. Okay, there we go.
Okay, so what can we actually use the for loop for, like as a more practical purpose? So oftentimes we want to print the entire contents of our array or our array list. So like instead of just printing one element at a time, we want to tell the computer to print the whole array list. So this is where for loops really come in handy, because we can use a for loop to like iterate through every single element of your array or array list. So it's going to like move through every element, and you can tell the computer how many times you want to go through it depending on how long your array or array list is. So basically how you print out all of the elements of an array, for example. So in the slide here, we have an example. You're going to make a for loop. Then inside your parentheses, you have the 3 conditions. So first you're going to create an integer variable. Here we'll just, and usually you want to set it to 0. As I said before, you can set it to like any number you want, but if you set it to 0, it's a lot easier to keep track of. And then the second condition is under what conditions the for loop will run. So here we're going to say as long as your integer variable is less than array.length. So as long as the counting variable is less than the number of elements in your array. And then the third condition is just adding 1 to your variable every time it goes through, so it keeps counting through your array. So basically what this for loop is going to do is to start at 0, which is the index of the first element in your array, and it runs again once for each element of your array. So inside the body of your for loop, the code is going to be system.out.print, so a print statement as always. And then you're going to print. Do you guys remember how to print just one element from your array? It's going to be this print statement and then the name of your array, and then in brackets the index of the element you want to print. So this way your counting variable is kind of acting as both the counting variable and the index of the element you want to print. So every time you run through your for loop, you're going to print the element of the array that has x as its index number. You kind of need to wrap your head around that, but it's a really effective way of printing every single element of your array and running through it as many times as there are elements in your array. Let us know if you need us to clarify that or anything, or explain it again, because it can be kind of confusing, like everything we've been talking about. And then your ArrayList basically uses the same method. So the only difference, it's also going to run through each and every single element in your ArrayList, but the only difference is the condition when you say how many times it's going to run. Instead of using .length like you would for array, to get the size or the number of elements in your ArrayList, you use .size parentheses as we taught you before at the beginning of the lesson. So here you're just going to do the name .size instead .length. And then also to print an individual element of an ArrayList, you use .get and then the index in parentheses. Unlike up here, you use the name and then in brackets. So those are basically the two differences, and it just has to do with how you do different individual methods depending on array or ArrayList. But it's the same overarching concept.
Okay. Yeah, so let's go ahead and try that. And I'm just going to use, okay, so I'm going to go ahead and delete this. I don't know if we have time to try out both. So it's the same concept like Alex said, so let's just go ahead and try this with our ArrayList. Okay, so we made our ArrayList and we added some elements to it. So we have 4 ints in this ArrayList, and if we wanted to print all of them, it's a lot easier to use this loop rather than doing ArrayList.get0, ArrayList.get1, ArrayList.get2, so on and so on, especially if we have like 100 elements. We don't want to spend 100 lines of code writing that out when we could do that in like 3 lines. They're a lot simpler. So let's go ahead and set up our for loop. So let's just do int x equals 0, int x is less than ArrayList.size. And if seeing this ArrayList.size here kind of confuses you, just think about the ArrayList.size is going to be an int. Like if you remember at the beginning when we printed out the ArrayList.size, we got 4. So this is essentially just saying x is less than 4. It's kind of just a shortcut, so we don't have to go out and figure out how many elements are in it, but just think of this as an int, in this case 4. So then we're going to do x plus plus, open parentheses, always remember you're closed, and then we are going to do just ArrayList.get and x. And this is going to work because first x is going to equal 0, so it'll print out ArrayList.get 0, and then x will equal 1, so it'll print out this one, x will equal 2, and then x will equal 3, and then it'll exit. Okay, so I'll give you a second to copy that down. Okay, so let's go ahead and compile that. It all looks good, and let's run it. So we should have 5, 3, 1, and 9. Yep, and we have 5, 3, 1, and 9, exactly like we expected. So really quick before we end, let's just try, what if we add one more? Well, this will take it into account because now ArrayList.size, it's going to be 5, so it'll be less than 5, and then it'll go all the way up until x equals 4. So then it'll include this last one. So if we compile it, it should be the same thing, just with the number 7 added on to the end. And that's exactly what we have. So we have 5, 3, 1, 9, 7, just like we have here. So again, this is really convenient. As you can see, this is really compact, only 3 lines, and we could use it to print an array list that might have like 100 elements, which is going to be a lot easier than typing out each one individually. All right, so again, this is the same concept that you would use for array. Here you would just do array.length, and here you would do array with the bracket and x instead of .get x. Otherwise, it's the same concept. And so if you want to try that on your own later, that would be great. So I think we're kind of running out of time, so I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing. But do you guys have any final questions? Okay, cool. So then I think we're pretty much done for today. Thank you guys for coming. And our next one will be Saturday.
Yep.
Yeah. So hopefully we'll see you guys then. And thanks for coming.
Yep. Thank you guys so much. Hope you had fun and learned something.
Only 2 people.